Hello, students. By now, you should have completed the Chapter 1 reading assignments. Chapter 1 goes over the basics of biology. One of those concepts, though, is taxonomy. Taxonomy is the science of naming and classifying organisms. This is done by identifying different characteristics between organisms and grouping them by thus their characteristics. Now, with taxonomy, there is one level that is the most broad of them all, which is domains. And it's so broad, there is only 3 domains that classify all life on Earth: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So in this page, we are going to go over bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Now, as we go over these 3 domains, I want you to keep in mind that you do need to know each of their characteristics and what makes them different from one another. That is going to be very key for the upcoming unit exam, the Unit 1 exam. What are the characteristics and what makes them different from each other? Now, let's start diving into each one, starting with bacteria. So we've heard about bacteria around us, bacteria that make us sick. The bacteria have their own domain. One of their biggest characteristics is that they are known as prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are cells that lack what's called a nucleus. And a nucleus holds DNA, which is the instructions of how to make a cell. So you can kind of think of DNA as a recipe of this is how you build a cell. And prokaryotes, they don't have a special structure that holds the DNA. DNA is kind of just floating within the cell. So all prokaryotes lack a nucleus. So bacteria, one of their biggest characteristics is that they are prokaryotes. The other is that they are what's called unicellular. Uni means one, so they are only one cell organisms. Those are the 2 biggest characteristics of bacteria that you need to know. They're prokaryotes, they lack a nucleus, and they're unicellular. They only have one cell. The last thing is how they differ from archaea, which we'll go over in a second. They differ in their DNA sequence. And keep in mind, like I said earlier, DNA is the instructions on how to make a cell. Due to their differences in their DNA, they are a different domain than archaea. Now, with that being said, let's go over archaea. You're going to notice right away, archaea are very, very similar to bacteria. They are also prokaryotes. They also lack a nucleus. Their DNA is just floating in their cell. They are also mostly unicellular. They are also made of just one cell. So notice how these 2 characteristics, prokaryotes and unicellular, are shared between bacteria and archaea. These are 2 characteristics that both of these domains have. Now, how do they differ from bacteria? Same as how we talked about bacteria. Archaea are different from bacteria by their DNA sequence, their instructions of how they are made. Archaea are slightly different than bacteria, but enough different where they deserve their own domain. Archaea, though, are very special. Some archaea are known to live in extreme environments, such as hot springs that are so hot that bacteria can't live in the Arctic ice, where temperatures are well below freezing, where other organisms can't live in, and even areas of high radiation. So archaea are very unique because they can live, some of them are known to live in these very extreme environments. And they can live in these extreme environments because they are made to live in these environments. So, for bacteria and archaea, know that both are prokaryotes. Both lack a nucleus. Both are mostly unicellular. Both are made mostly of just one cell only. They are very, very small organisms. They differ by their DNA, by their structure. The last domain is eukarya. Now, the biggest difference between eukarya and the other 2 domains is that eukarya are eukaryotic, or eukaryotes. Eukaryote means they have a true nucleus. A nucleus is a structure that holds the DNA. So eukaryotes have a structure that's specifically made to house DNA, house the instructions on how to make a cell. And this is unique solely to this kingdom. No other domain is made up of eukaryotes. Something else that's unique is eukarya not only can be unicellular, made of one cell, but they're also multicellular, made of multiple cells. They're the only domain that contains multicellular organisms. An example of a eukarya is us humans. We are made up of millions and billions and trillions of cells. All of our cells are eukaryotes. They all contain a nucleus, and thus we are part of the eukarya domain. Other things that are contained within this domain are plants, animals, and fungi. All plants, animals, and fungi are in the domain of eukarya because they are made up of eukaryotic cells, of cells that contain a nucleus. So, with this, with the domains, again, know their differences, know the characteristics. Bacteria and archaea are both prokaryotic. They do not contain a nucleus. In addition, bacteria and archaea are unicellular. They are made up of one cell only. They differ in their DNA sequence, though, of how they are produced. Remember, DNA is the instructions of how to produce a cell. Eukarya, though, is unique because it is made of eukaryotic cells, cells that contain a nucleus, cells that contain an organelle that houses DNA. They can also be unicellular, one cell, or multicellular, multiple cells. And examples of them are plants, animals, and fungi. Animals including us humans.